Hello and welcome to this episode of Be the Wolf. I am here today with Angie Knierim. Now, if you have been a person who has just left the your physical well-being in the hands of others, meaning you did what the doctors told you. You followed the rules as far as the nutrition. You just left your wellness in the hands of others and did what you were told and did what all the media and everybody else is telling you to do, then you're going to want to listen to this episode. And if you've done that, you're probably beginning to realize, wait, what the fuck? This person is saying this thing. This person is saying this thing. And I don't even know, this doctor disagrees with that doctor. And what the hell am I actually supposed to do? So we're going to go into Angie's story about taking control of her own life and her own health and her own wellness. And so if you struggled with that, and it doesn't matter if you had the same problems as her, anything that has to do with your own wellness, anything that has to do with your spiritual wellness, your emotional wellness, your physical wellness, your job wellness, your relationship wellness, this episode is going to be important for you. Hi, Angie.
Hi, Janaea. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm super excited to dive into this conversation because it is a lot of people are suffering.
Yes.
A lot of people are suffering and they don't know what to do because all the people who are in the place of authority telling them what they should do, they're either telling them that they're crazy, that there's nothing wrong with them, or that whatever they tell you to do doesn't actually work. And I know you know this story very well. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. 100%.
So I love you have a title here that we're going to go into just because I think it's really awesome. Engineer by day, advocate by calling, novelist in the editing cave. And before we dive into your story, I'm going to guess your novel is maybe about your story, or is it a fiction?
Actually, it's not, surprisingly. Yeah, the novel showed up during the pandemic for me. I was actually writing a book at the time. My background in engineering and program management, I was writing a book on strategic operations, and I felt it was an obligatory process and I was really struggling with it. And during the pandemic, I was watching a TV show called Once Upon a Time, if anyone's ever seen it. It's a magical story on ABC about Disneyland and so forth. Huge Disney fan here. But all of a sudden I had this idea of, God, I just love magic. And I'm like, well, how can I make a life or career out of magic, right? And then all of a sudden the ideas crossed and I thought, I could write a book about magic. There's a potential career path. So I literally took my laptop out the next morning, sat in the patio. I had Oracle cards, I had my coffee, and I just literally started channeling this book. It was just the most amazing experience. And it's a book, it's called Emberland. And it's about these two kids who are loosely based on my two kids who kind of magically get transformed into this other land called Emberland. They get magically taken away by an ember and they go on this big journey to ultimately save the queen. So the book's written, but now I'm like deep in the editing cave, as I said. So lots of different things, right? So one thing that's funny is because I always told myself it said engineer by day. My degree's in engineering, spent a lot of years in engineering and still in that space. But I told myself for decades, I'm not creative. That was the story I told myself. And I believed it, right? And I carried it for so long. And then all of a sudden, this came out of me in 2020. And then it took me a few years to actually write it. But all of a sudden, I went, wait a second, that's a story I told myself that really ended up not being true. So it really kind of started, I think, part of my journey of transformation of I don't have to believe the story I carry about myself. There could be something different underneath. Right. So that's one part of kind of where we'll go outside of the wellness piece. But yeah.
It's really interesting because the fact that you reclaimed the creative part of yourself in 2020 probably plays a big role in what you were able to do later. And we'll talk about that. We'll get into that. Everyone, what the hell are you talking about, Janae?
I know we're all over the place, but it's interesting you say that because I don't know that I had connected those two dots before until just now as I said that. I'm like, oh, that
Yeah.
was a starting pathway to my whole body, human, spiritual transformation that's kind of happened in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Or now I'll say 5-6 years.
And you spent a little bit of time with me, so you know I connect
Yes.
dots real fast.
Yes, you do. You're very good at dot connecting. That is for sure.
Okay, so let's go into this story. And it's not exactly a short story. Like you struggled for a long time. So let's start in the struggle or the beginning of the struggle.
Yeah. Like the real awareness of the struggle for me came in 2024. So just a couple of years ago. And I went off the pill and because my doctor said, let's see if you're in perimenopause or not. So the story is about perimenopause, midlife women. We'll kind of go there just to set the stage for everyone. And when I went off the pill, it's like my body just completely, I lost it. Everything went wrong. I had hot flashes at work to the point like people were like coming, I had to have the air conditioning on so high that people would come to work with ski caps and winter coats on because I couldn't keep it warm and it had to be so cold in there for me. But I had hot flashes and then like joint pain started and I had plantar fasciitis. I had sleep issues up in the middle of the night, nearly almost every night. 3 o'clock in the morning, I'd be up for a couple hours, which is a very common symptom in perimenopause. But here's the thing. I had never heard that word before. Like that, I'd heard of menopause, right? The old ladies get menopause, but I'd never heard of perimenopause. So I started kind of digging into it. And the doctor I had at the time, when I went in to see her, she actually referred me to a doctor. Her name is Dr. Mary Claire Haver. And she's one of the leading advocates for women's health. She's an OBGYN for perimenopause and menopause. She's one of the first. And I started learning about her in the spring of 24. And as I started, yeah.
Go there.
Yep.
As all this stuff is starting to happen.
Yep.
Because I think now I feel like it's a little bit more common. People are talking about perimenopause.
Yes.
And the men who are listening, don't turn it off because if you are of a certain age, if you are in your mid to late 30s, you're going to want to pay attention to this because you think about, oh, menopause is the old ladies thing. And I don't want too young to have to deal with any of my girlfriends in that. But if your girlfriends are, this starts to happen for some women at 35.
Yes.
So it's something that as a man, you want to be paying attention to as well, because if you have an understanding of what's going on, then you can be supportive in a different way than maybe you would have been able to be in the past. So yeah, what is it feeling like? You hadn't heard the word.
I hadn't heard the word. I started doing my own research and the doctor I had I loved her. She was great, just not super knowledgeable. And that's the challenge we're in society, even today, 2 years later, is that I think it's somewhere around 20% of OBGYNs feel comfortable or even doctors feel comfortable prescribing hormone therapy or even know how to deal with it or even know how all of these symptoms are connected. I think there's over 100 symptoms, right? They're associated with different body organ systems, your brain fog, your heart. I had heart palpitations and chest pain that put me in the ER probably 3 times over the last 10 years, which goes to your point earlier of this wasn't going on for 2 years. This was going on for probably about 13 years for me, but I didn't connect the dots, right? Until I realized what perimenopause is and how it affects our entire body. Because I think nearly every organ system in our body has estrogen receptors. So as we go through perimenopause, so menopause is we don't have any, right? We've down to next to nothing from an estrogen and progesterone and testosterone perspective. It's dropped really low. Perimenopause it's going like this, right? We're having major swings in our hormones. And that's what causes the significant issues that we end up facing. But the doctors aren't educated on that. And I won't go into super details around this, but it goes back to 2002. There was a women's health initiative study. Other doctors, I'm not a doctor, so I just want to make that clear. I'm not providing medical advice here. Doctors can speak to this, but there was a study that was released and it went to the press before the actual data was analyzed by peers. And it said estrogen causes breast cancer. And it went absolute mainstream. And it just, every doctor stopped prescribing it. Every woman said, no, I don't want to take it. I don't want to get breast cancer. Well, once they got into actually looking at the data and really analyzing the data, that wasn't the case. There's a lot of nuance around it. You can go and research the Women's Health Initiative from 2002. But because of that, we lost a generation of education for doctors, for women and men, right? So this whole generation of women didn't get the education that hormone therapy is beneficial. And I'm not saying it's not for everyone, right? But every woman deserves to understand what it's about and make the choice for themselves if they want to take it. Because it isn't just around addressing these symptoms that we're facing, which is phenomenal because it's just a massive, for me, quality of life improvement. But it's also preventative from your heart, your brain, and your bones. So it's really amazing what we can do if we have the information and can advocate for ourselves.
Yeah. Okay. So going back, like all of this stuff is happening to you, and what are the doctors telling you?
Essentially, they're running all my tests, right?
Yeah.
They're running blood work. The heart issues I was having, they were sending me to a cardiologist. I'm doing stress tests. All my tests are coming back normal. I'm all coming in within normal ranges, right? Because perimenopause is here.
Right.
I could take a blood test today or an hour later, but the levels are going to be very different, high or low.
Really quick for those listening, menopause is a yo-yo. It's like everything yo-yos constantly. If you're not watching,
high swings and major lows. Yeah.
And so if you take the blood test at one point, it might show up as one thing, but then an hour later it could be completely different.
Exactly.
Right. So what were you? Everything was coming back normal. And so what are you thinking and feeling as this is happening?
I started to think I was going crazy. How can I be so miserable? One of the worst symptoms was migraines. I got migraines so bad, upwards of 15 a month, like really bad, to the point they put me in the hospital because they couldn't treat them at urgent care. When everybody's, it's just normal, right? That just happens in life. Women just get that as you get older, right? So nobody was giving me any real reasons as to why these things were happening. Oh, your chest pain. They actually diagnosed my chest pain with something called costochondritis, which is the inflammation of the cartilage by your ribs. And now I'm like, okay, I guess that's what I have. But I don't think that was the case. I'm pretty sure I haven't had chest pain for years now. I've been on hormone therapy for now 2 years. But anyway, I think they don't have an answer for us. And I think there's a real opportunity for doctors to get educated and women to get educated. And it's probably going to take a generation for us to get to the point where we have enough doctors educated. So what I'm trying to do is educate women to say we need to learn about this stuff and advocate for ourselves because we deserve a better quality of life. We shouldn't have to suffer, because I think women are just inherently taught that, oh, I'm fine, it's okay. I'm fine is the traditional thing, which used to be my favorite phrase of, oh, I'm fine, when in reality I wasn't. Right.
Yeah. So they feel like you're going crazy.
Yeah.
And we have the training of just power through and make sure that you're okay, to tell everybody, okay, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm curious though, before we go deeper into this, is there a history of people not believing what you say in your past?
Nothing really jumps out as you say that. Not that I can think of. We'll let that percolate as we're talking here, right? See if something pops up, but not that I can think of.
And I know a lot of people who are struggling with some health stuff and their tests are coming back normal, because the bottom line is, I know this, is most doctors don't know actually what to look for. You do the blood test and it's just a snapshot in time. And also, it's not like I was struggling through some stuff where I was just like, I was gaining weight and I couldn't and finally I went to a naturopath and she took my adrenals, did my adrenals. Like I spit into this thing like every hour of the day for whatever. And she's like, your estrogen is 6 times higher than normal. Your norepinephrine is like 4 times lower than it should be. Your serotonin is 6 times lower than you should be, and your whatever, I don't know, but it was crazy. She's like, you can pretty much look at a donut across the street and gain a pound because your adrenals are so out of whack. But all my doctors were telling me everything was normal. So you're going crazy. How long did you feel like you were crazy? Here's
the interesting part. It started in 2012, and it started with me crying in the car on the way to work, right? And the migraines were starting to hit, right? And so now it's 2026. But during that period, I had gone off the pill after I'd had my kids, right? And so that was part of it. And what I've since learned is the pill can mask and or manage some of your perimenopause symptoms. So I was off the pill. And I don't know, I was off for probably about a year or two, somewhere in that range. And during that period, that I was just an absolute mess. Like I didn't know how to manage myself. And then finally I was just like, okay, I'm just going to go back on the pill. And then I went back on, things started to normalize. I didn't connect the dots, right? That was managing these things, because I went back on the pill because my periods were so bad, which they were since I was 17. But so now I'm back on the pill. The other stuff started normalizing. I wasn't crying in the car. The migraine settled a little bit. And but the problem was, is I felt like there was something else going on, that I didn't want to be on the pill, right? And I'm like, this just doesn't feel right. Like taking these hormones for so long, right? I started at 17. I was now 42, 43 or somewhere in that range. I'm like, I don't think it's healthy to be on it for that long. So I decided maybe I need to shift, right? So then I went back off the pill and thought maybe I'll get an IUD. Well, I went back off the pill. All the horrible symptoms came back again. And it turned out my body rejected the IUD. And the crazy part was, I thought it was the IUD that I ended up having severe abdominal pain, severe bleeding that literally dropped me to the ground at work as I was walking across campus one day. Drove myself to the ER. They couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. Whole nother story here. But they admitted me for 5 days, and they ran test after test on me for 5 days trying to figure out what was wrong. And I kept telling them, something happened when my body rejected the IUD. And they're like, there's no evidence showing that's the problem. And I just couldn't let go of that, right? So for years, until
Now let's stay there for a second, because this is one thing I think people don't get. It's like, you know your body better than anybody else. And don't get me wrong, there are plenty of people who have psychosomatic symptoms, and I have clients who have emotional ties, like they have an emotional trigger and they will get a particular illness, and it's just a thing that happens. But the thing is like, you know your body. And I know for me, I remember once I had a fever of 104.5, and everyone's like,
oh my
"Why
goodness.
go to the hospital?" I'm like, because I knew I was going to be fine. There was like this knowing that was so deep, and my body, I get fevers at the drop of a hat. If I'm a little off balance, my body will give me spike of fever to kill whatever's there. And that's what it's always done.
Right.
And so I did put myself in a cold ass bathtub, and I was not having a good time with that, but I knew I was going to be okay. And people thought I was crazy. But again, there's this knowing about your specific body. So you knew that something was going on when your body rejected the IUD.
Yeah.
What year was this?
This would have been 2016. So 2016. Yeah. So I think I had around 8 or 9 specialists that came in to evaluate me, and they just couldn't find anything wrong. So they just said, okay, once all your levels normalized, because I had all sorts of things that were off that they kept checking for. There was some fluid in my abdomen. Once everything leveled out, they discharged me and said, go get a colonoscopy. We think that's it. I go get a colonoscopy, that comes back 100%, everything's fine, right? So I'm like, how does something like put me in the hospital for 5 days and I'm better, but that's just a weird thing, right? Now we can fast forward until last year. I had the same episode happened, but now I was in menopause. So I ended up having severe bleeding and severe abdominal pain last summer. And I'm like, how do you do that when you're in menopause, right? You're not supposed to have severe bleeding. So go to the hospital. Turns out I had some major fibroids, like really decently sized fibroids, 2 of them. And so ended up going to see an OBGYN surgeon and scheduled a hysterectomy. Post hysterectomy, they found, obviously they just take everything out. But in doing so, the pathology report revealed I had what is called adenomyosis. And I'm like, I don't even know what that is. So most people have heard of endometriosis, which is when the endometrial linings, the cells grow outside of your uterine lining. It can grow into your colon, it can grow into your bladder, all the different places. Adenomyosis is where it grows inside the walls of the uterus. So that can cause this severe abdominal pain and severe bleeding. Very common that causes that. The problem is both endometriosis and adenomyosis are only diagnosed through exploratory surgery right now. So they would have, in 2016, they would have had to take me into the OR, and somebody would have had to have a feeling that's what I had based on the symptoms, because we haven't studied women the way we've studied men, right? So there's not enough information. Now there's more companies that are working on blood tests to figure out endometriosis and things like that. But we're just at a strange place in our history. I've shared this story with other people before. I think we're at a tipping point in our history where it's the first time that we've actually had female doctors that are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, right? That are now experiencing things that women of this age experience, and they're doctors. And now they're realizing, wait a second, these aren't just whiny women from that I was trained on in my residency. These are actual real health issues that we need to start exploring. So now we're finding more money and research being put into women's health so that we don't have women suffering with these types of things.
And I remember you telling me about when doctors are trained, and somebody told you this, it was a female doctor, I think, that when women come in, this is what they tell you in residency is that they're whiny women. Tell me about that.
That was actually Dr. Mary Claire Haver. So she talks about that. If you Google her and you look up whiny women, she will talk about, and she talks about how horribly she feels. That's how she saw women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s when she was a younger resident, because that's how she was trained to look at women. Because there was no study or work done to say these are real health issues, essentially, for the most part, due to estrogen deficiency. And now she's just moved on the absolute other side and focuses only on menopause care. And there's a whole host, they call themselves the menopause of doctors, and that's growing significantly over the last 5 to 8 years. For me, it's like I'm 2.5 years into learning all this stuff. These doctors have been advocating for the last 4, 5, 6, 7 years, right? So it's moving in the right direction. But it's still astounding to me. Like my social media feed is covered with, I follow probably 100 different doctors. So I hear about this all the time, but other women, they don't want to follow doctors, right? They just want their doctor to tell them what they need to do. The problem is we're at that disconnect because the doctor doesn't know. So how do we get to the women to know, to advocate for themselves that they're not crazy? They can't move their shoulder. It's frozen shoulder due to estrogen deficiency, right? There's all these things and they're all connected, and they're seeing all these different doctors. But those doctors aren't talking to say, wait a second, right? My pulmonologist isn't talking about the chronic cough. My oral surgeon isn't talking about the TMJ and all the other different doctors, right? So my OBGYN isn't talking about the severe bleeding. They're not connecting the dots to say, wait a second, there might be one common thread here, and it's perimenopause.
And one of the things too, and this is why I like that functional medicine is starting to become a thing. I've always been more of an advocate of Chinese medicine in general because it looks at the whole system rather than just this part. And this part, we're like, oh, if the frozen shoulder, and then we're going to physical therapy, and then the TMJ, we're going to one doctor here, we're going another doctor here. But the symptom that root is something that's affecting all of those things, but none of those doctors are going to be putting those pieces together. And we always thought we go to our general GP or our general practice, and but all they do is run blood tests and send you to specialists. It's like so ridiculous. Like I spent most of my life without health insurance, and I really didn't care because I spent a lot of money on acupuncture and Chinese doctors. If I have something that's actually off, I go to somebody who's going to help me inherit the system of it. Is my typical thing. But so you are going through this and you start to discover about, and what was the shift where you stopped just fully listening to what the doctors are telling you? There's got to be this point, right? There's a moment, this tipping point where it's like, I feel like I'm freaking crazy. These things keep happening. It's the same goddamn symptoms for the last 13 years or whatever it is. And tell me what that shift was for you.
I think I would say it was probably in August of 24, right? So I'd been about 6 months into my perimenopause journey, and I had gone through a couple doctors in that process, and they just went to the extremes. And I get that the doctors want to be careful and make sure they rule things out, right? But I was an example of why not having a perimenopause or menopause educated doctor really costs our healthcare system. Because when you go on estrogen, like if you've not had estrogen for a while, your estrogen is volatile, right? You go on estrogen, that increase in estrogen is just naturally going to increase bleeding, right? And it's not like extreme or anything. It could be, I guess. But for me, I'd been I think 11 months in, like menopause is 12 months without a period, right? I was 11 months in, my doctor gave me estrogen, and all of a sudden I started bleeding again. And she went, "Oh my goodness, we need to do an ultrasound. We need to make sure you're not having issues, that there's no cancer." And I'm like, oh my, like I completely freaked out thinking, wow, that's what could happen. So she took me off the estrogen. My symptoms came back. It was really awful. So I went 3 months before I got to see an OBGYN who could do a biopsy,
Jeez.
right? And so I'm 3 months thinking in these horrible symptoms, thinking I have cancer, right? And then it comes back. And during this time, after I got the results back that it was okay, I found out that it's normal that you go on estrogen and it can bleed a little, but the doctors don't know that yet, right? So she went to extremes. And again, she was trying to be conservative.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Yeah.
but think about that, right? I had a biopsy, I had an ultrasound, I had 3 months of me suffering, and I'm just one example of what happened there. So it was really after I got the results back of that biopsy that I went, hold on a second, this just is crazy. I've been miserable for 3 months. I think I just need to I need to fight a little harder. So I fought my doctor now, and I said, okay, so now test came back. I want you to increase my estrogen. I want you to increase my progesterone, and I want to start testosterone. She said, let's balance you on estrogen, progesterone. So we did that for a couple months. She started me on testosterone, and I was starting to feel better, right? My joint and muscle pain went away. My frozen shoulder went away. All these things. I'm like, oh, finally, thank God, right?
Yeah.
And here's the crazy part. Like, one of the craziest symptoms I had was a chronic cough, which a smaller percentage of women get. All of a sudden I went, oh my God, after 8 years, I don't have a chronic cough anymore. And I'm like, how is that estrogen related? Because estrogen is an anti-inflammatory. So my lungs were inflamed, so it reduced the inflammation in my lungs and the cough stopped. So this all went through kind of December of 24, and then January of 24, things started shifting. Go ahead.
Okay. Tell me though, like when all this is happening, right? The biopsy thing, like emotionally, what is the breaking point there?
Oh,
Because
I will. Yeah, it was.
what I'm hearing you're telling me all the things.
Yeah.
And everybody who's listening is like, oh yeah, that's a lot. But
Yep.
like, what was it actually like? Because
It
I
was.
can tell you all the things about my life,
Yes.
but it doesn't let you really connect to me until I know what it was like for you or for
Yeah.
me. Or you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
tell me what it
No,
was like for you.
it was probably the worst 3 months of my life during that period.
In what way?
So this is language I hadn't used for a year. It took me a year to be able to say this, but I had suicidal thoughts during that 3 months because I had never felt so just, I wasn't being heard, right? And my doctor's just, sorry, we can't get you in for 3 months. And I'm like, but do you understand what I'm experiencing? And I will tell you the actual appointment when I went in to get, I was beyond the breaking point at this point. I might actually cry here. I went to my OBGYN to have the biopsy, and they said, we don't have you on the schedule. And I said, but you scheduled this. I sat right here and scheduled it with you, this specific woman, when I was here for my kind of consultation. And she said, we don't have you on the books. And I said, but because there was an insurance issue, I had to call and clarify something. When I clarified it the week before, she took me off the books. I fucking lost it. If they had cameras in that place, they probably were on the verge of calling security. I literally said, I cannot wait anymore. I have been waiting for 3 months thinking I have cancer. I don't know what's going on. I'm suffering through all these symptoms, which I was still trying to figure out. Were they perimen? I didn't really know because I didn't have a doctor who was explaining what these symptoms were. And I felt like I was 90 years old. I couldn't walk. My brain fog was horrible. I wasn't sleeping. And I didn't know what to do anymore. So to the point, I'm like, me as a grown woman, I was 53 years old at the time. I stood there crying, screaming, I need to see a doctor. And they said, sorry, ma'am, we can't fit you in. I said, I'm not leaving here until you get me in because I cannot wait 3 more months to get an appointment.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm not going anywhere. And she said, okay, let me see here. And I waited, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes and nothing happened. I said, what's the status? They said, we're trying to figure it out. I don't want you to figure out. Again, I lost it. I'm like yelling at these women at the counter. And to the point I started hyperventilating and had to lay on the ground and just try to catch my breath. And oddly, there wasn't anybody else in the waiting room. I think had it been, it would have been a very different situation. But I literally was crying and hyperventilating on the floor in this OBGYN's office. Finally, they come out, escort me to a room. And I don't know, half an hour later, the doctor comes in, does the biopsy, and that was it. And I'd never had such a dismissive experience in my life. The doctor was fine. She was great. But the fact that her office staff did not have the awareness to what I had just experienced it was devastating to me. And so clearly I never went back to that doctor, but that was just such a heart-wrenching experience that I had hit such a breaking point that I could not function properly. If I were to look back and see a video of myself, I'd be like, that's not me. I wouldn't behave that way. I wouldn't lay on the floor crying and hyperventilating about an appointment. But the 3 months leading up to that, where I'd sit on my couch and think I was suicidal and not tell anybody I was having those feelings, was really difficult.
Yeah.
After I'd passed through suicidal thoughts, then I would tell my family, right? And I'd say, I just want you guys to know I'm going through some stuff. It's not you. This is totally me. I don't know what's happening to my body. I'm doing everything I can to try and figure it out. But it's an unknown to me right now. And I'm working my best to figure it out. So please don't take on these emotions. You guys didn't have anything to do with this. It's my stuff and I'm trying to figure it out.
Really quick, first of all, thank you for going there, because you're not the only one who's been in that situation and who has felt like that under these circumstances. And I want to note that even once you finally kind of came out of it a little bit, you still were trying to take care of your family.
I know. Absolutely right.
And this is the thing for us to actually shift. And I talk a lot about bringing back these parts of ourselves that have been stuffed down because they weren't allowed, they were forbidden, they were too much, too wrong, all of that stuff. This is, just thank you again for going there, because this is actually what it typically takes for people to reclaim the part of them that can advocate for themselves. And now, so you have been like sitting on the couch, and oftentimes I want to say this because this is really real, and thank you for going there and giving me the opportunity to say this, because this is what happens for a lot of people. And I know a lot more people have had suicidal thoughts than what they say. And what I've seen,
scary to say. That's a scary thing to admit, right? And I would just say dark thoughts in the past, right? So it took me a good year to actually use those words.
And I know for me, because I've been in that place many times, every single time it happens, it has happened when there's this aspect of myself that I desperately need to make things work in my life in order to actually get that. But there's this part of myself that I'm so afraid to let seen or let out, because maybe I was punished for it, or I was beaten for it, I was shamed for it, whatever it was. So everything in your story right there is the moment, it's the breaking point where the advocate for yourself part had to come out. And that part had been shoved down for so long that it's going to come out fucking messy. It's going to come out in a crisis where you're against the wall. It's like your back is against the wall and there's nothing left of the, I'm going to keep it together. I'm going to just stay quiet, not let anybody know what's going on with me. It was this breaking point. And this is what it typically takes for a shift and for a change in people's life, is this crisis where we are put with our back against the wall and we cannot fucking do it the old way anymore. And it's either literally take my life or let that part of me that was deemed bad and not okay actually come out. And when it comes out in those circumstances, it comes out messy as fuck. And then we're like, I shouldn't have been that person. I fucking wasn't me and blah, blah, blah. But you were actually you. That part was just shoved in a closet for so fucking long. Of course, when you let a tiger, which is the part of you that advocates, out of the closet, and it's been locked in the closet for 40 something years, it's gonna fucking come out a little bit crazy. And that is totally normal. And it's exactly what happens.
I love that you said that it's totally normal, right? Because I put the story on myself last year, 2 years ago, whenever it was, that, oh my God, I shouldn't have done that. Just like you said, right? Oh, that was like, I was crazy. I went insane. I lost it in front of that whole office full of people. But I think what the way you frame that is exactly what it is, that I wasn't being heard. Nobody was listening to me for months and months. I was suffering, and I got to this, like you said, a breaking point, and my body said, fucking enough, I'm done. And it all just came out. And like, I don't even remember the words I said, but I remember I was loud
Yeah.
and crying and red faced, the whole bit. Yeah.
I'm guessing that you had played the good girl on some
Yep.
level, being like nice and amenable and put
Yep.
together, and definitely not the wild woman who advocates for herself most of
Yep.
your life.
That
Yeah.
is 100% true. I've been the people pleaser. I've been the perfectionist. I don't want anybody to think anything bad of me. I want everyone to like me. And I've had pockets of kind of tapping into the wolf, I guess you'd say, right? Throughout I've done personal development work over the years, but it's just interesting. It's like my mind, my body was never ready to release different parts. I had to get to the point of that explosion, or whatever you want to call it. I had to go through different iterations of it, and I'm not done, I'm sure. I'm sure there's plenty of opportunities for me to grow and shift yet, but I think it's allowing myself to be that way. And I think having an opportunity like this today to talk about this so other women can hear it and share it, so that there's more of us having these stories, realizing when we hear other women talk about their stories, we give each other permission to go, yep, me too. I did that too. And there's nothing wrong, bad, or indifferent about me because that happened. And I think for me, you're not supposed to say that. You're not supposed to put those words out there. You're not supposed, we shouldn't, all that stuff I was told for so long. And I'm like, yeah, but that allowed me to just stuff everything and become so rigid for so long, to please everyone else but me.
Yeah, and this is exactly what happens. And so it's this place where you grow up feeling like, oh, this is the safer way to be, because if my parents don't love me, I'm not going to get fed. I'm going to be out on my own. I'm 5 years old, so I must be this way. And there's this point in our lives where we hit this place where where it literally feels like this, because especially when you're getting to the suicidal thoughts thing, and like this is a common thing that happens when when you need to reclaim an aspect of you. And I can't speak for a lot of people, but I know for me, every time I've been suicidal, and there have been a lot of times in my life, the people that know my stories know, you guys have been listening, you know the shit that's happened to me. And every single time at that point, it's a choice of me stepping into more of who I actually am, some aspect that I stuffed down, or dying. And that's literally what the choice feels like. And here you are in this situation where physically everything had been put to this wall, where you're physically, medically at this place where it feels like you're going to die. So either way, it's like I either advocate for myself and live, or I fucking die. And that's usually what it takes to unwind this stuff. It's part of
It's
why I'm so
interesting.
passionate about the work that I do,
Yeah.
because I don't want everybody to have fucking crisis like that
Yeah.
so many times to actually get the life that they're made for. So welcome back, a big piece of you in that. And it was messy as fuck in that time, but it hasn't been so messy since. Like now you've been just on this thing. I'm doing the research, I'm advocating for myself, I'm doing the things. You unlocked it and released that part of you back into your ecosystem. And what was the result of doing that?
That wasn't quite the end yet. So when my doctor finally put me on, so this is where it gets a little tricky. They put me on testosterone, and I think they put on too high of a dose because I found myself getting really angry all the time. And I don't know if it was too much testosterone or not enough estrogen. Anyway, we can get back to whatever those details are, because they're both connected to anger. So not enough estrogen, too much testosterone. Yeah.
And it also could be all of the anger that you had to process for stuffing that aspect of yourself for a long time.
Yeah.
Yes, the hormones and the emotional stuff too.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So what ended up happening was I'm like, I need to do something. So I started therapy. I'm like, I had never been and I never really connected those dots, that my explosion that year connected. I was only connecting it to testosterone and estrogen. But so I went into therapy, and went through about 4 months or so, started learning some things about how I wasn't setting boundaries. I was just more the people pleaser, the perfectionist, and make sure everybody's okay. And I'm going to sacrifice my comfort. I don't want anybody else to be uncomfortable. So I'll be the one that's uncomfortable and I'll just adjust my behavior, which was a common behavior that I carried for decades. And so once I was starting to learn and shift that way, and adjusting my testosterone and estrogen, right? So all of those combined, I started going, wait a second, I think I'm someone different, right? And maybe, like to your point, the real me is starting to come out and I'm allowing her to come out
Wow.
because I've realized that the way I've been behaving hasn't been in my best interest. It's been to take care of everyone else. And the problem of me taking care of everyone else and fixing and solving and handling is a detriment to everyone that's around me because now I'm over functioning and everybody else is under functioning.
Yeah.
So that was a big aha for me in my behavior. So I had to shift that from a perspective of not just in my personal family life, but at work. I started shifting how I was showing up because I found myself doing that in so many different areas of my life. And once I had the awareness of how I showed up and that I overfunctioned and make sure everybody's okay, but not me, people started seeing a different side of me, right? I'm not the happy go lucky, Angie's going to make everything better person anymore. All of a sudden, she's setting boundaries and rules. And wait a second, that doesn't work for her anymore. So there was a little more tension in all of my relationships as I've started shifting over the last year and a half or so. So it's definitely been a process. And I love who I'm becoming. I love how I'm shifting and changing, but not everybody around me is shifting and changing at the same level. It's kind of figuring out how to work with that. But I really am grateful for how I've started to shift and being able to be more confident in myself and being okay with not worried about the other person versus now I focus on me first.
Yeah.
Right. And giving myself permission that's okay. It's not selfish. It's not self centered. It's okay to take care of me first because I've not done it for my whole life, really.
Yeah. I mean, and it is, and this is the thing too. It's like when we are swung to one side, right? We've shoved down the part of ourselves that can advocate, can take care of things, can take care of ourselves. What we end up doing is we attract and we become friends with and lovers with and coworkers with and our bosses and all of this, the opposite side of the coin. So we tend to attract more narcissistic kind of people in our life who are the ones who will have it their way and da 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 because it's a fit, right? I'm missing
Right.
part of me, and this part of them is overdeveloped, right? You're over in the high functioning and squash yourself. They're overdeveloped in the make everybody do everything for me and be over. So it fits and creates one person.
Right.
Either person, it's ironically the wound is the same, but it's just two
Yeah.
different strategies. And so it's this frequency attraction that happens. But
Yeah.
once one heals and changes their frequency, the match, what the ways that they filled each other up before
Right.
don't match anymore. And
Yeah.
so who is who becomes attracted to you and magnetized towards you will be different moving
Right.
forward. Some people, they'll rise up on the journey too, or they'll try and pull you down, is what
Yep.
it's like one or the other, but it's all part of the process. It's just
Right.
not alignment. It's not, you had, and I think for me, in my past history, it's like I had to have those relationships in order to learn and grow the things that I needed to do in order to get myself to the next level so I could get closer to the life that I was made for. You had to go through all this crazy health stuff. You had to be pushed against that wall before you could commit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so powerful the way you just frame that around how we are attracted to different people based on who we are and how we show up in the world. I think the more we can get these kinds of conversations out into the public sector, the more women are going to be able to see it before it happens. Right. So to notice yourself and to be aware of how you're engaging in the world for me, I didn't see it for decades, right? I wasn't available, my mind wasn't available to see how I was showing up until I hit that wall, right? To get to your point there too, right? It's like, how do we do it so we're not in a crisis? How could I have gotten to that place before without having that mental crisis on the floor in my OBGYN's office, right? I popped up. Could I not have had that while I was having the suicidal thoughts? Could I not have had it 10 years earlier? But I didn't. I wasn't meant to, right? I was on the path that I'm on.
Yeah. And I think one of the things is people don't know what the signs to look for are. I can't speak for everybody. I can speak for myself. For me, it was like I was always seeking something. I was always looking for something because there was some knowing that things weren't quite right. And so for you and your health, it was you knew something was not quite. So there was a seeking path that was happening. And when you're seeking and nothing seems to be working, that's usually a sign that there's an a need to reclaim some aspect of you in order for that stuff to resolve itself. But it's usually very subtle at first, and it gets to a point where it gets eventually louder and louder and louder, and then we are at that crisis point where there is no choice anymore. It's I either die, the person I'm with consumes me completely, or I take my own life. And at that point, when it's that dire, is when we make that choice to reclaim that part of ourselves. When it feels safer to the nervous system to allow your advocate part of yourself back. And it took that much before your nervous system would allow that part to come back and be forefront.
I love that because to me, the nervous system piece, like feeling safe in my body, like that's new language to me this past year. And I love that you brought that up because I think it's really important for women to know, like, how are you feeling in that moment with whomever you're with, a friend, a family member, a colleague? Are you feeling safe? And what does that mean? Right? Because I don't know that I would have understood what that meant before. But
Yeah.
now I can look at how I'm showing up with people in my life and are my shoulders relaxed, right? Is my jaw clenched or not? Am I feeling tense in my chest? Right. And now I can notice when that's happening. I don't notice it all the time, but I certainly now have an awareness around, am I feeling safe? If there's some level of anxiety showing up, I can ask myself, what does my nervous system need? Whereas a year ago, I didn't know what the heck that meant. So I'm so glad you brought that up.
And to your point is I didn't even know I had anxiety. I didn't know I felt unsafe. I didn't know any of that. It started going away. It didn't just go away. I did a lot of work to get there. But then there was this like, something's not quite right. It's not how it's supposed to be. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like I get if I had a win, it would feel okay, but it would still not be enough. There was always something that was just not quite right. And because it's so fucking subtle, nobody knows, oh, hey, I need to go to one of Janae's events or I need to go to whatever. Because you go to the
Yeah.
therapist, you talk about the stuff, and that doesn't actually reflect it back at the
Right.
deeper level because don't know what's going on with you unless they've been through it and have unwound it at the deepest
Yeah.
level. And most people never do that. It takes
Right.
stuff like this to unwind it a little bit. And that's just part of the journey.
Right.
There's other stuff to reclaim before you get to the suicidal ideation part. Thank you so much for sharing because
Yeah.
I know how many people would just not say what you said. And it's so important for people to understand because there have been a lot of people that have been in that same position.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm happy to share it because my whole goal is I don't want women to suffer the way I did, right? Educate yourself, advocate for yourself, and take care of it before it gets to that point of crisis. And I think if people can do what you're talking about here, understand what's trying to be reclaimed. I didn't have that language a year ago. Maybe if I would have been able to sit on the couch when I was having those thoughts, maybe I could have asked myself, what does my nervous system need? What's trying to be revealed in my body that is who I truly am? I didn't know about that kind of stuff. So I think the work you do is just absolutely beautiful. And it's like peeling an onion, right? A little bit comes out every time we do it, and it just continues to reveal the real us. And it's a beautiful place when we allow ourselves to get there.
Yeah, that's why the whole Be the Wolf thing is so important to me. They took the wolves out of the ecosystem.
Yeah.
and nobody knew everything. The park was fine enough.
Right.
They didn't even realize that the ecosystem had collapsed. This is true. And then they put the wolves back in, and all of a sudden it started to change, and everything got better and more
Right.
beautiful and more vibrant and lush, and became what it was made to be.
Right.
And that is such it. I think that's always been the challenge in the work that I do, is it's hidden, it's invisible.
Right.
I think years ago I had this shamanic journey, and I came back and they said, "What did they tell you was your purpose?" And I said, "To uncover that which is unseen."
Ooh,
Which
I love that.
which is so funny, because that's what I was chasing. I'm like, something's wrong. I don't know what it is.
Exactly.
Acupuncture and ayahuasca, and not what happened. Right.
Yeah.
How do people get in touch with you and the things that you're offering right now, as far as you've got like a thing to help people with these symptoms and
Yes.
group? Tell us about that.
Yes.
And I have one more question to ask you.
Okay, sure. So I founded a group called it's Empowering Women in Midlife Community, and you can find it at Join EWM, Join Empowering Women in Midlife. So joinewm.com. You can sign up for free. And it's essentially everything I learned over the last 2 years in helping myself feel better. I created a library. I created a social media feed where I share new learnings and things like that with the women. And it's growing slowly, but it's growing. And I just a couple weeks ago started a weekly call. It's just 30 minutes where we just get on and chat about what's going on in life and have these kind of conversations, talk about the wins, the losses, the struggles, right? Let's just have real honest conversations as women. So that's at joinewm.com, or you can find me on Instagram or LinkedIn. They're all under Angie Knierim. Angie Knierim, I guess, would be the handle. Yep.
Awesome. Okay. So for you,
Yes.
what does it be the wolf mean?
I think it's really about getting back to my authentic self, right? And allowing that part of me, like how Yosemite grew with the wolves. How do I allow myself to grow into the person who I'm meant to be? And it's doing this kind of work, right? And to put the boundaries up and to say no to things and be okay if something doesn't work out, and not people pleasing, and being okay if one of my biggest fears, a big part of my life, was fear of judgment, right? That's where my perfectionism came from, and not worrying about that anymore. And I think that's part of the journey, is to just allow myself to be who I am and not worrying what other people think, and just doing it anyway.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Angie, for sharing your story and going
Thank
deep.
you.
I appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Jania. You're doing beautiful work. Thank you.
All right, everybody. Thanks for watching and listening to this episode of Be the Wealth. We'll see you all next time.
Bye, everyone.